Music has our back, right? When we walk around singing it in our head and, you know, it's doing something to us. It's helping us to receive a powerful message. All right. Well, today, in keeping with our theme of unstoppable, I'm going to be talking about the power of commitment. Now, you know, when you say commitment, sometimes you think, or people think, I know I thought, it's like, well, it's I have to commit to getting something done, or my chores, or my goals, or whatever. But really, when we're committing to something, we get to live from our authentic self. We get to live our true nature, call forth those divine forces through us, and rely on the higher forces to go to work for us in our life. I have been reading this book. It's called Living a Committed Life by Lynne Twist. And I was introduced to her, I don't know, maybe back in 2008 or 9 with her book, The Soul of Money. But she just talks about, she's got a really deep prosperity consciousness, and it's very unity themed when you read it. But this book has been very inspiring to me. So I thought, well, all right, we're going to talk about commitment for a few Sundays, because commitment is really, it's who we are. We just may not call it commitment. Maybe we're calling it, well, I walk in faith, right? I remember to walk in faith. I remember to ask for the divine forces to support me. But just for the definition of commitment for this series, we're just going to say that commitment is dedication to a cause or purpose larger than ourselves, which means it's something out of our comfort zone that we want to do that we've never done before. It doesn't have to be a giant thing. You don't have to solve world hunger. But there is someone who Lynne Twist knows who did actually decide he was going to commit to ending world hunger. His name is Werner Erhard, and he started the Hunger Project back in the late 70s. And you might have heard of the Hunger Project. It is a huge nonprofit. You can find them online. They've made a huge impact on our planet, but they're not just giving people food for money, or they're not just giving money for food, and they're not just handing out food. They really have this consciousness of, you teach someone to live in their own purpose, and then the supply comes. He does believe, this man, Werner Erhard, he believes that we are a planet of sufficiency, that even now, with I don't know how many billion people are on this planet, even now, there's enough for everybody. But he decided to start the Hunger Project because he recognized most people are hungry. There are some people who are hungry for food, that they need food. But there are also as many people, if not more, who are hungry for a life purpose, a life of purpose. So his goal, when he committed to ending world hunger, his goal was actually to find the people who needed food and who hungered for food, and find the people who hungered for purpose and bring them together. That was his commitment. So we're committing to something bigger than ourselves, right? That is what gives us a life of purpose. But it does not have to be as big as the Hunger Project. If it's out of our comfort zone, it's our soul's work. If we feel called to do it, it's our soul's work. If we feel like it's our sacred mission to work on this right now, it's our soul's work. So this is why commitment. It's an act of courage. Because we don't really need to commit to things that are inside our comfort zone. I mean, we already do that stuff right now without thinking about it. We're on autopilot for all the stuff inside of our comfort zone. So commitment is an act of courage. It takes boldness. It takes integrity to stay committed. It's not just making a decision, right? It's rearranging our life around our commitment. It does become the context of our life. And so when I think about my own things I've committed myself to, my life revolves around those things, right? Like my life revolves around unity. My life revolves around taking care of my own health. Because if I don't care for myself, like I can't show up for unity, I can't show up for my family, and I can't show up for my puppy. And my puppy is the other thing I'm committed to. My life literally revolves around that dog right now. everything. Well, hey, Deanna, could you come? Well, you know what? I've already been away from Lilu for 2 hours today. I can't go anywhere else now. I just got to stay home with the dog. So my life is revolving around her. But see, that's what happens. We know we've made a commitment to something because now our life revolves around it. So it's not really something to be made lightly. We are giving our life to that commitment. So at the beginning of each year, when we have, I don't know how many millions of people decide to make a New Year's resolution, and they say, well, and I've done this like so many times myself, well, this will be the year I lose that weight. I think this will be the year I'll go ahead and finally, step up my exercise routine. But see, 6 weeks into the year, people already start giving up on that. And it's because their life does not revolve around their new commitment. That's how we know it's a commitment. Our life revolves around that. You know what, I also have a training schedule, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do this because I got to work out. There's very few things I actually have to cancel my training appointment for, right? So my life revolves around coming to ZPA, coming here. 0 Point Athletics in Calamasa, 1103 Calamasa Boulevard. Okay, see? So a commitment, our life will revolve around it. Now, the other powerful thing about commitment is we can turn our breakdowns, the places in our life where we fall apart, we can turn those into breakthroughs when we commit. Lynne Twist says this: it enables you to take your grievances and heartaches about the world and do something about it. So something inspires us or catches us, like this man, Werner Erhard. Like he looked at this, he got, of course, everybody knows there's a world hunger issue. But when he put it together with, people aren't just hungry for food though. There are also people hungry for purpose. And when he put that together, he had an aha moment. And so suddenly that's why that became his commitment, his life purpose to do that. He had a grievance. He had a grievance about the world, like worrying about all these people who are not living in their purpose. When we don't live in our purpose, we go on autopilot. So there's something that calls to us. We may lose sleep over it. We may worry about it. We may find ourselves getting in a lot of conversations about it with our friends. Did you hear about this? I don't like how this is going. But it's on our mind a lot. And then suddenly that's when we'll feel a calling. Like, well, if we can do something about it, right? If there's some way we could participate, we'll start to feel a calling. And they call it a calling. I don't know who actually named it, the calling, but your purpose, your life purpose, your sacred mission. But calling, we're calling something forth through us. That's what's happening. When we experience a calling for something, we're calling forth the higher forces through us to support us in doing that calling and manifesting that calling and getting together the things that need to come together for that calling. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And also then over these next 3 Sundays also, we'll be going deeper into commitment. But today I'm going to talk about how we are actually created to have a calling. We're created to do that. And we're designed to be guided by source energy in order for that calling to come forth through us. And then I'm going to talk about why taking a stand is actually the catalyst for all of that. Okay, so we are created for a calling. We are created for a calling. I don't know if you've heard of Buckminster Fuller. He's an everything man. He's like a Renaissance man. He is an architect. He is a designer. He is a writer. He is a philosopher. And there's more. There's more about him. When he was born in 1895, he lived until 1983. When he was 32 years old, he was contemplating suicide. He was walking around this lake. He was grieving over a child that he and his wife lost a couple years earlier. And now he's grieving because he lost his business, his livelihood. His wife is expecting a child. And he thinks if he committed suicide, that his family could have the insurance money or whatever, I guess, from that, and that his family would be okay. But in that moment he was contemplating that, he felt himself lifted up into this white light, and a voice spoke to him. And this is what this voice said to him. You do not belong to you. You belong to the universe, and your role is to apply yourself to converting your experiences to the highest advantage of others. So in that moment, Bucky, as his friends called him, was given a calling. Now I want you to just sit for a second, and I'm going to say this to you again because this is a message for each one of us, because all of us are an extension of Source walking around on this planet, and we didn't just come here to sit in front of Netflix all day. We came here to call forth greater good through us, for us, as us. So this is the universe talking to each of us here. You do not belong to you. You belong to the universe. You belong to the universe. And your role is to apply yourself to converting your experiences to the highest advantage of others. We learn, we receive a calling, and we pass it on. So we each have a sacred calling. We each have this sacred mission because we were created for life. We were created to serve life. Life's not here to serve us. It supports us, but life is here to support us so that we can serve life. We are here to be of service. And through service, ordinary people become extraordinary, simply because they follow their sacred mission, or they commit to it. They say yes to their sacred mission. Now, when we make a commitment, when we say yes to our sacred mission, that commitment then forges us into the person that we need to be so that mission can happen, right? So that we call forth that. We are turned into the person who can make that happen. And an interesting byproduct of that is because we are living and acting in faith, our frailties, the doubts we have about ourselves, those all fall to the wayside. Because now, living in faith, we're being guided constantly by the universe. Things are coming together in our life constantly because of our commitment. This is why God does not call the qualified. God qualifies the called. If you are already qualified to do this thing, you are in your comfort zone. And if you can do it if you want to, but it's not a sacred mission. It's just something fun that you know you could do with no problem. Okay, so that's why we're qualified along the way. So we are created for a calling, and the calling is going to include, no matter how that shows up in our life, calling greater forth or greater good forth into our life. That's what our calling brings along. But to follow our calling, we have to be able to follow divine guidance. We have to be able to do that. We have to be able to listen and act when God speaks. Right? We're given an instruction, and then we have to act on it. So we're designed to receive guidance from Source because when we are living in our soul's purpose of calling forth the divine into our life, we're going to have to deliver on something that's beyond our ordinary abilities. We're going to have to deliver on something beyond our ordinary abilities. We're not going to know like how everything's going to work out. We only know maybe the next thing to do. The guy who came up with the Hunger Project, Werner Erhard, all he knew was where to start. He just knew where to start. He knew a lot of really smart people that were capable of helping him. And he gathered them together. And he said, this is my new calling, everybody. So let's do this. Let's do this. Okay, so we're designed to receive guidance from Source. That may sound like or feel like intuition or like we're following our heart. But what happens is our commitment, it becomes so powerful. We have to surrender our personal will to divine will. We have to surrender our personal will because it's our personal will that's going to say, oh, you don't know how to do this. This could end up being really hard. You might have to change your whole life around for this. Okay, that's our personal will, right? My personal will, you know what it says so many times? It's like, okay, sure, that sounds amazing. Well, you're going to need to go back to school. You're going to need to take 45 workshops. You're going to have to like do all of these other things, and then we'll hit that. then we'll go there. As a result of my little me, okay, or my ego, I became what you call overread and underdone. Like I read so many books, but I wasn't living the information. I was gathering data, but I wasn't living it. But see, our little me, our ego, our personal will, so smart. It figures if it tricked us once before that will work, and it'll just keep doing it again. But this is, again, part of our soul's purpose. Learning to surrender our personal will to the divine will. So we have to listen and act when God speaks. We live in faith and we act in faith. So when we're committing to something, when we're saying yes to our sacred mission, this means we are living in our soul's purpose. And it's this process. It's going to feel very exciting. It's going to feel very energizing. Because we're listening and we're acting in faith to call forth something bigger than what we know we can handle on our own. So along with faith comes grace. Okay, when we listen and act in faith, we also receive the gifts of grace. And of course, we know grace helps us to see the entire planet as sacred, and that where we stand as sacred ground, and ourselves as sacred beings. And we interact with life in a sacred way because we know we are a sacred being, and life is all sacred, and everybody else is all sacred. We remember God is all things, which means that if we've got a calling, we want to create something in our life, it's bigger than what we know how to handle, but we'd like to do it, but it seems, and it's very exciting, but it's also scary, and we don't know really how we're going to follow through on this. We have the gift of grace. So we just take the next step in faith. We just act in courage and do that next thing. Because when we are living in faith, we understand, we remember, a solution can come from anywhere because God is all things, and that means everything then is a potential solution for us, a potential piece of guidance, like to do the next thing. We also can receive information if we have an epiphany about something. Maybe it's a sudden, quick epiphany. Maybe it's a tragedy. Maybe somebody experiences a tragedy. Like the Amber Alert system is put into use now because a family lost their daughter Amber. And they felt a calling to set up a system because they didn't want another parent to have to go through what they did. And this system has actually worked really well. It's saved thousands of children. But this is how we serve life. We listen, we act when God speaks. We're created for a calling. We are designed to listen to Source. We're designed to be guided by Source. But then it starts with this. We must take a stand for something. This is what leads to our making a commitment, which leads to a life filled with purpose. Okay, so taking a stand for something is a catalyst for change. It's a catalyst for living in our purpose. Now, taking a stand, it's important. I didn't understand this before, but taking a stand is not having a point of view or having a position on something. If you think about a point of view or a position or a perception, these are all geographical, right? If we get up and we move, our point of view changes. If we all got up right now and walked over to the window and looked out the window, our point of view would change because our position changed. So our perception changes. Now, when we take a stand for something, this is unchanging. But our perception and our point of view can actually change through our life. Okay, we can change our mind about religion. And like we'll think, well, I was born into this religion and it's the only religion. And then all of a sudden, we get a new perception. We've gotten up and we've moved. We have a new position. We see things differently. We change our minds. People change their mind about politics, right? And you think nobody would ever change their mind about politics, but they do. But see, when we're coming from a position, it might become divisive because if our position is, I'm right and you're wrong, then that causes division. But see, when we take a stand, we are taking a stand for something. We're not against something, we are for something. When we take a stand for something, we're hungry for that something. That's what we are hungry for. Taking a stand is actually a visionary act. It's a visionary act, and something we can't accomplish on our own. We need the guidance of Source. We need like the support maybe of a team. But this is the importance of taking a stand. It leads to a commitment. And we get in the flow then. Whatever we've committed to, see it as its own entity, its own energetic force. It wants to be created. It sees you as the creator. Like it can be created through you. You can manifest it into your physical life. It knows this about you. So when you take a stand, you get committed, and things start moving for you. It brings along with it the means to make it so. Things want to happen together when we take a stand for something and we feel our purpose. We feel we are in a purpose. Also, when we take a stand, because it's a visionary act, we take into account everyone's ideas. We take into account everyone's point of view. This is why great leaders are visionaries. A great leader will not condemn anybody. A great leader takes everyone's ideas, everyone's positions into account. Because we're creating for everyone, really. We're creating for everyone. So we are created for a calling. And this sacred mission, it desires to work through us, but we have to surrender to it. Okay, remember in the story of Moses, okay, leaving his comfortable home to go to Egypt, Moses had to surrender. Okay, Yeshua had to surrender. Okay, the great leaders have had to surrender. And we have to then rely on Source to be guided to the next best thing, the next thing to do. And that all starts with our taking a stand for something. So we take a stand and we make a commitment to that. Like I personally can say I've taken a stand for unity, but our principles, because they work, right? And so I took a stand there. I took a stand. And that was just a catalyst for everything that happened afterwards. So here is our call to action this week. I'm going to start with our affirmation. And we're going to say this in two parts. And I'm going to ask you to put your hand on your heart. And we're going to say just this first sentence together. I belong to the universe. 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 And let's say the next part. And my role is to let it work its greater good through me. Okay, and my role is to let it work its greater good through me. One more time now, the whole thing. I belong to the universe, and my role is to let it work its greater good through me. When we start thinking about having a calling, it can feel really overwhelming. And then we start thinking of all the limiting things in our head. Like, what if I'm not capable of doing this? What if this is wishful thinking? What if this really is not a calling, but me just being selfish about something? What if somebody says to me, you know, so-and-so could do it better. I don't even know why you're bothering. Right? We start hearing these voices in our head. Just get a real job. We're going to try to talk ourselves out of it. That little me, because it just wants to keep us in our comfort zone and safe, will try to talk us out of it. So we're going to slow ourselves down here if we're listening to that voice. This affirmation takes the pressure off of us, right? I belong to the universe. So this means that what's happening through me, if it's my role to let it work its greater good through me, I don't have to go chasing after dreams. I just have to have the dream. I just have to be inspired. I just have to desire to commit to it. I have to be hungry for it, and it will come after me. it will come after me. You don't go find a winning idea. You let the winning idea find you, right? We're all flowers and we're pollinated. We've got all this pollen in us. Are you going to go chasing after the bees? Flowers don't chase after bees. They just let the bee come to them. They let the bee. They don't try to flag it down. They don't try to trick it. They don't try to manipulate it. The flower is just the flower, and the bee always comes to the flower. We belong to the universe. Our calling will always come to us. It will always choose us. That's why we are hungry for it. We're hungry for it. Our only job is just to remember who we are. That God is all things, and that means me. So let's say that together. God is all things, and that means me. And I want you to do this to your shoulders. We're going to do this one more time. God is all things, and that means me. That means me. Sometimes I walk around the house. That means me. Wake up, girl. That means me. That's our job, is just to remember that, and that we're here to serve that. We're here to serve that mission that is waiting for us to open and let it through, right? That greater good, the mission, will find its way through us. So we're committing to something that is greater than what we can just manage on our own. We're growing through this commitment. We are learning new things through this commitment. We are acting on faith and feeling excited and feeling enthusiastic through this commitment, through making a commitment to live our mission. And then by living our mission, we redirect all of our negative thinking, all of our limitation thinking. It starts falling behind us because we're living and acting in faith. We're doing the next best thing, and look, surprise, it worked out. So we just keep living and acting in faith and doing the next best thing. Well, I'm going to invite you to do this call to action with me this week. Ask yourself, what am I hungry for? What am I hungry for? What am I passionate about? What keeps me up at night? Because I want to add to this. I want to bring this into the world. I feel like this would serve people. So what is it? Now I know my calling came from my struggle. I struggled for years and years with what I call low spiritual self-esteem. I'm sure a lot of people actually call it that. I didn't invent that. I heard it from Carolyn Mace. But I had low spiritual self-esteem, which meant that for myself, I believed other people could do it, but I couldn't. I needed somebody to come in on their white horse and rescue me and make all these good things happen for me so I could just step into the life that I wanted. I didn't believe I was capable of doing it on my own. All right? I discovered the Unity principles and I learned them. I knew them, but I wasn't yet acting on them. I wasn't yet living them. And then finally one day, just something clicked. I had an epiphany and I started living it. And I started seeing little things change. I still struggle with it. Sometimes I'm not listening. You all heard my story about Lilu, right? So sometimes I'm not listening, so I have to keep reminding myself. My job is to just remember who I am, where I come from. That's my job, to remember God is all things, and that means me. That's my job. I don't have to gather together resources. I don't have to gather like somebody else to do it all for me. I just have to remember God is all things, and that means me. And I commit to it. And I trust now, I have faith that because I'm hungry for a thing, it means it wants to be called forth through me. So what is it that we're hungry for? Right? I struggled so much that I eventually wanted to give, when I learned that we live this principle, and I wanted to give this to other people. Of course, I wanted to just force it down everybody's throat, is what I wanted to do. But I found another quote by Buckminster Fuller that really changed how I think. He said this: "You cannot change how someone thinks, but you can give them a tool to use which will lead them to think differently." You can give them a tool to use. So this is the reason that we want to say yes to our sacred assignment. The reason that we want to be deeply committed to something that is bigger than we are. We We want this, to have to rely on source, to have to keep acting on guidance. It's not guidance one time. Okay, you just do this one thing and you're good forever. Your soul would be so bored with you if that's how life was. No, we have to keep acting on guidance and doing the next best thing. We have to keep relying on faith. We have to let those higher forces go to work in our life. And it's necessary and it's good for us to keep having the experiences where we have to shift our perception again. We have to shift our perception from problem-oriented to being solution-oriented, right? We have to keep learning to shift our perception. We have to keep learning to shift out of our limitation thinking, right? Over and over and over again, we have to shift out of limitation thinking. This is how ordinary people become extraordinary. They say yes to their sacred mission. They make that commitment. So Moses, Yeshua, Gandhi, Helen Keller, Meryl Streep, Jimi Hendrix. These are all really famous people that said yes to their sacred mission. But there are millions of people who do say yes to their sacred mission in smaller ways. I know a woman in Washington State. She woke up one day and she just felt like everybody needed to have access to books. She built a tiny library. It's what they call a tiny library. It's like 3 shelves and a box that big. She nailed it to a tree in her front yard or hung it to a tree or something. She filled it with used books. She also puts cans of soup in there. And she has a glass cover on it. And people come by and they'll take a book or they'll take a can of soup. But she felt like she had to do this thing. Suddenly, people are giving her a bunch of used books. Suddenly, people are now bringing her other, cans of food. And then people are asking her, how can I do this? How can I do this at my house? And so she's helping other people build tiny libraries. We have a tiny library, and at least one that I know of. No, there's 2 tiny. There's like 10? Okay. And I know of one in Redlands at least, so there's got to be more than that. Yeah, 10? There's at least 10. Okay. 25? There's so many now. But see, this woman that I know, she did this like 20 years ago. I don't know if she's the first tiny library person or not, but see, our calling, the thing that we're hungry to do, that we're hungry to call forth, it doesn't have to be gigantic, right? To me, the tiny library is just not a big deal. But it was a big deal to her. And she let a force go working through her so that she followed through on it and turned it into a big thing. So I'm going to wrap this up with a quote here from W.H. Murray. He says this, until one is committed, there's hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. You know why we feel ineffective? We feel ineffective because we are hungering for a purpose. We're hungering for this purpose that we have not yet committed ourselves to. Whoops, wasn't done with that. The moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events, issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. So life starts happening. Life starts conspiring to support this mission, to support your sacred mission, your sacred calling. Things are organizing themselves around you. We act in faith. We make the commitment. We're acting in faith, and the universe right there knows you're serious, starts making things happen. See, when we're not serious, we go back and forth in our mind. Well, what if it's too much work? But I'd really love to do this. Oh, but it could just be so much. So we're going back and forth. How would your waiter feel at your restaurant? I'd like the cheeseburger. No, really, I think I want the mac and cheese. No, really, I think I'd like a salad. Your waiter, all they can do is sit there and wait for you to make up your mind and commit to a meal. We can't even eat at a restaurant until we commit to something. Right? So life then organizes itself around us. We will still have obstacles. We'll still have our doubts. We'll still maybe have anxiety and worries. We're still going to have those things Because it's an opportunity, again, to call forth source through us, again, to act in faith, again, so we know, okay, can I change this? Yes or no? Okay, maybe not. So maybe I have to rise above it. Maybe I have to do something different here at this little crossroads. But we're not going to see the path to take until we commit. We have to commit. You know, I always end this with, and that's how we create heaven on earth, right? Are we supposed to create heaven on earth if we don't commit? Heaven on earth's not going to create itself around us. It's waiting to be formed through us. That's how we commit, or how we create. We commit, and then we create heaven on earth. So until next time, remember this. You belong to the universe. You are designed to do all of this. You are the activity of spirit walking around on this planet right now with every grace, every resource that you could possibly need is available to you, through you, for you, as you. In everything you do, you are blessed. And so it is.